Good morning. My name is Lori Schmidt, the Wolf Curator at the International Wolf Center, and I want to welcome you to the pack update. We will continue to do these as we are closed to the public. We may have a reopening sometime at the end of the month. So for the short term, I will continue to give you an update on the pack. And what you're watching is Leanne Martin and Kelly Godfrey are distributing some small tidbits of pork roast and beef roast and venison. And we are trying something a little bit different. I think last week's webinar, you caught a little bit of a glimpse of some frustration from Grayson having Denali be extremely food possessive about large carcasses. So what we've decided to do is on a daily basis, try to give at least 4 pounds of meat per day per wolf and allow them to have one carcass feeding a week. And that will likely be either Friday night or Saturday night, depending upon, what temperatures are and how things are looking. We will continue to monitor, activities. We expect when we start getting warmer weather that the hormones will change and things will kind of calm down a little bit. But this morning it was 18 degrees, so not exactly warmer weather. It was warm for October morning, but not for May fishing opener coming up tomorrow. So very calm this morning. I'm actually very impressed with Grayson. I'm not impressed with Axel peeing on the staff, but there's that. But I'm very impressed with Grayson and Denali standing next to each other, taking food, having really no issues. Bolts is right in the mix there. Bolts has been actually getting quite a bit. He's been hand feeding with me. I've been bringing in bone dust and I've been guarding food for him, and we really are impressed with where Bolts is at right now. I saw a great behavior last night of Bolts and Grayson nose to nose and a very social greeting. Grayson started licking, doing appeasement behavior to Bolts' face. So that was a real good interaction for them. So as always, I will be willing to answer questions and be able to address anything that you have. Today is going to be a little bit short. We have a 9:30 school Zoom connection, so I'll be off by 9:25. But I will, again, be back next Friday. And I'm in the works right now planning for a medical exam for these 4 individuals. We did have word that the vet clinic is willing to work with us. They still have some restrictions on having large, groups of people gathering. So we're working in teams with a handoff. Bolts is going to go in for his throat inspection, try to figure out what's going on with his high-pitched howl. Denali is going to go get a hip check. Not the kind of hip check that goes on in hockey, but the hip check in x-rays, taking a look at where he's at. We're going to also probably biopsy one of his small growths that he has, which is very similar to the mast cell tumor that his brother had, Aiden had. So we're going to take a look at it. These just are small little lumps that he's had for over a year. They have not materialized. We just want to double check what they are and make sure that we have a good diagnosis. Everybody's going to get blood work, and that includes CBCs, as well as we look at ionized calcium. We look at parathyroid hormones. We will also look at, let's see, what are they slated for? Lyme's titer. Bolts, actually, in the 2012 litter, was the only litter that we've ever had that has had reactive limes. Those 2 came from Sandstone, which their facility, again, where they were picked up, which is a really high kind of a deer tick concentration area. Bolts' titers for limes is at 320, and a moderate is anywhere between 110 and I can't remember the range, is 110 and 380 or something like that. So he's kind of in the high range of moderate exposure to Lyme's disease. So we're going to retest his titers, take a look at that. If there's any issues that we need to address as far as Lyme's disease, we've not seen any indication of Lyme's. I had a dog with Lyme's disease, and it had some significant joint issues, which I can relate to since I've had Lyme's disease. The reality is the joint issues are migratory, meaning that they go from back legs to front legs to wrists to elbows. I mean, kind of migrating throughout the body and making it hard to really diagnose what's going on. And so we'll double check that, but we're going to check everybody's Lyme titers. One of the reasons why we freeze deer prior to coming in is hopefully to reduce that ectoparasite tick issue on deer. We had a case in 2004 where we did feed a deer, not a live deer, a dead roadkill, but that had not been frozen. And our retiree, Lakota, came down with Ehrlichia. She was very, very sick, anorexic, high fevers, typical tick-borne issues. And at that time, Ehrlichia had not been identified in northern Minnesota at that time. So it took us a while to try to diagnose it. It came in on, I actually picked up the deer on Veterans Day, November 11th, and she was deathly ill on Thanksgiving Day. When we came in to do a Thanksgiving check, she would not get up. She was definitely having issues. So it had a fairly long incubation period. So in other words, she was probably bit that day or shortly after, and it took, again, another 10 to 14 days before we saw the symptoms. So those are problems. So those are things that we address. We're going to actually feature the medical exams, which we hope to have done here in the next couple of weeks. On our next actually paid webinar, we have a webinar series that's part of our program revenue for wolf care, and that's going to be in June. I think it's June 18th. We'll give not only an update on their medical exams, but we'll also share with you kind of their histories and what we look at and what those values are. So looks like there's not all that much hunger. We had a good, successful day yesterday feeding a lot of chicken. So we've been also trying very hard to not leave residual meat lying in the pen. If you were watching the webcam yesterday, you may have noticed that I was able to pressure wash the pond. The pond is drained. The drain is working. I'm going to try to cut that mic for a bit and get rid of that wind. So we drained the pond. The pond drain is working, so it is thawed, but the water line is still frozen. So as soon as that water line thaws, we'll be able to fill up that pond. You can see it's been pressure washed and cleaned. I believe I got all the raving droppings off the rock, and waiting hopefully for the next course of raven droppings. But by not having a lot of food lying around, we're going to try to diminish the raven population within the enclosure. Now, they're a great stimuli, there's no doubt. And so having those ravens available for the wolves to chase are good distractions, but we want to also make sure that we keep the area clean, especially where they're feeding. So you'll see a couple of hides. We left a couple of hides for them to chew on, but pretty much picked up all the other bones, anything else that might be drawing any parasites, maggots, anything like that. We want to try to clean up. So like I said, when I was happy, Denali there looking at the camera because it does make a noise when it moves. Denali right next to Grayson. Grayson seeming pretty comfortable with Denali today. Those moments in time when he's frustrated about food are things that we know that are just circumstances that occur in that particular moment, and we try to get them to relax, get them to distract, get them to not focus on each other. And one of the big distractions we've been having lately is letting Gryzor have his view of the pack 24/7. So Gryzor, his area is open right now. You can kind of see we opened with the snow being gone and the ice being gone there. We were able to open that wider so that he's got a full view of the pack and can hang out there. And that's been a good distraction also for the wolves. Now they're, greeting there quite a bit. Actually, we see probably bolts greeting there more than anybody. So that's what's been going on. The pen's been various stages of cleaning. Most of the hay is gone from here. All of the hay has gone from the exhibit. We, like I said, pressure washed. We are getting the benches out for the behind the scenes programs, which will start June 5th in a limited fashion. We are trying to figure out how to bring people here without having a circumstance where there's large crowds congregating. So the behind the scenes, which normally had 20 people at a time, is only having 10. We'll be able to have people in family groups or social groups together in one spot. We also have, and then the retirement. So if I kind of pan over to this side, you'll see benches up over here by retirement. We have benches in the far back as well, so we can kind of spread people out and have more personalized, smaller group sessions for the behind the scenes. That's how we hope to keep the staff safe, hope to keep the public safe, and ultimately it's the wolves who are at risk. If we have a circumstance where our staff gets sick and it spreads amongst our staff, we want to make sure that the lives of the wolves do not change. If someone gets sick, that there's another team that can step in. We can clean the facility. We can make sure that a secondary team that has the same skill levels, we call level 1, level 2, and level 3 in the handling. Level 3 is the top level handlers that have the most experience. And we want to make sure, again, that there's always a level 3 person on a team, level 2 that can pair up with each other, and then level 1 that can assist with various other observations, meds, delivery, the type of things that are equally important to our monitoring is, again, the wolves being watched without the humans in the enclosure. That's one of the things that I think is very important to note, is that the wolves do ramp up, get excited when it comes to a circumstance of competition for greeting staff, and especially Grayson and Axel. Grayson wants to greet. He's very, very social and he wants to greet. And Axel gets in his way sometimes, and that causes some tension. So right now, what I asked the staff to do, to rather than have meat lying around where the ravens get it, I asked them to put the meat in the medical pen. And there's bolts coming in for a mouthful. Yesterday we did that. Axel came in for 3 or 4 pieces of chicken yesterday. But because Bolts gets a lot of power and confidence in the medical pen, this is really helping him, because he can face these guys in this chute. So if they're giving too much grief, he just stands in the chute. His back is protected because nobody's behind him. Sometimes he locks Denali behind him. But he can face off and he can guard and he can feel a little bit more confident. So it's really helping Bolts get a little bit more confidence. Grayson, again, coming in for a little bit of extra food. Denali, who doesn't need extra food, eating most of it inside there as well. So that's one of the things when people ask, how are we managing in the absence of pups coming in? Well, certainly a feeding change is something that we're trying to do here. The risk of a feeding change, again, their digestive systems are designed to gorge and eat 20% of their body weight at one time. Well, if they have that mentality to gorge, and then typically they have a break from feeding. So in other words, if wolves in the wild make a kill, you make a kill, and then maybe 3-4 days you try to catch again another deer or another moose or maybe beaver, and it might take you a few days. So you've got a time frame in between when you gorged, and that's why it's called feast and famine. Well, in captivity, if we feast every day, we worry about obesity, especially for our older wolves, and Denali is one of those that I'm concerned about. I certainly don't want him to be compromised physically because he's gained too much weight. So definitely want to watch that, and that's why we're trying different things on what works and what doesn't work. So there's a raven. Again, we have not witnessed the ravens walking into the medical pen. So that's why we've been kind of using that because that is, we hope, a safety zone for our food so it isn't stolen. You hear the ravens less than thrilled with my new plan. But hopefully that'll be less ravens sitting around marking up my rocks. So they'll come over and probably get those small tidbits and compete for that and fly off with it. This is how Gryzor, and formerly Luna, would get extra meat when they weren't supposed to. So Luna was supposed to be on a 1 pound a day diet, and we would come in and there'd be a chicken thigh or something we did not feed her, even deer legs. And in addition to her catching her own snowshoe hare, she wasn't adhering to her diet very well, which was obviously a concern when she was, when the necropsy was done. They rated her as obese, and she was heavier than we wanted to be. But it's definitely a challenge when you have an animal with cancer and it's terminal, trying to make those choices. And 1 pound of meat is not a lot of meat for a wolf, but keep in mind that when we do a pound, that's the feeding amount. By the time we get done delivering meds, which for Luna was, turmeric, glucosamine, Dasequin, Durlactin, various things that she needed, she ended up with probably a little bit more than a pound. So right now, what's going on? They're interested in what the ravens are stealing. And so I would assume the ravens are almost ready to clear up that front there. But Kelly and Leanne are now going to go in with Gryzor and try to get Gryzor his breakfast. I do have a clip that I am going to put on YouTube do a short video here today where Gryzor chased some ravens on his birthday webinar on Tuesday. We did give him a deer leg, and he wasn't all that interested in it, but it was pretty warm. His birthday was, in the 50s, and that's pretty warm. He's got a very full coat of hair. And so what we ended up doing was we let him have that leg. That night, he brought it out. He was chewing on it, and most of the meat was gone the next morning. And one of our viewers emailed me and said, did you know that, Kim Wheeler, actually, sorry, not just one of our viewers, one of our family members, emailed me and said Gryzor was chasing a raven at about 5:58 in the morning. So I went back to the surveillance cameras, and sure enough, he had a little bit of raven chasing life left in him at 16. So that was kind of special to watch. So right now, like I said, this is a pan tilt zoom camera that is in the pack holding area. Gryzor is having, looks to me like a little bit of pork. Yesterday he did chew chickens with bones. That's something that we do give the wolves. We don't give them any cooked bones because that is splintering, but raw bones are fine. We've never had an issue with the wolves, and we were actually testing his teeth because he had that premolar abscess earlier this year. That's completely gone. He's able to chew on both sides of his mouth. Watched him eat 3 pounds of chicken yesterday, no problem. So he enjoyed that. So this morning it's a pork roast cut up in a little bit smaller chunks. And he does like to be hand-fed and not allow things to get dirty. So it's a challenge for the staff to make sure the meat is clean and held for him. So additional questions. Is it easy to mistake an Arctic wolf for a tundra wolf? Well, the Arctic wolves are what people believe to be living beyond the treeless zone, and there's a lot of discussions about Arctic wolf and tundra wolf being slang terms, and slang terms meaning that they're not, by their scientific name, Canis lupus arctos. And so I just read a paper actually Paul Paquette put out about weights on Arctic versus tundra wolves. And so I could certainly share that with you, Tony. And, again, the idea of the Arctic wolf, most people equate those to the wolves that are in Greenland or Ellesmere Island or Axel Heiberg Island in the zone of what people consider to be the true Arctic. So, like I said, I can share that paper with you on the differences in weights and morphology is what I believe that paper was. I think Paul Paquette just published it. So Robert asked, do you think the wolves react negatively to seeing people wearing masks when people are allowed to visit? I believe less negatively to masks than they are to sunglasses and hats. Wolves really like to see eyes. And contrary to what you may hear, a mask does not cover your eyes. So a mask for us in wolf care is most concerning because I think I'm most concerned about, again, the little elastic straps that are on them. That looks like something that wolves would love to snap and pull. So I don't, we use bandanas. I don't wear a mask with the wolves, but we will be wearing masks when we're around. So I think it's just another thing to get used to. Like I said, my experience with them is baseball caps that cover your eyes, sunglasses, because they're really eye-driven more than they are probably mouth-driven, although when they communicate, they do use lip curls and facial expressions. And there's some research out there about dogs having the ability to read facial expressions, including smiles. I've read some of that literature from dog trainers and dog studies, but I think for the most part, eye contact is the main thing that they're kind of looking at. So Gryzor is finishing his breakfast, and there's a question: does Gryzor's right eye get really dry? We keep an eye on that. We do have eye drops for him. His, if you're not familiar with Gryzor's circumstance, he had some trauma to the top of his head, and that trauma created some nerve damage, and his right eyelid does not, upper eyelid does not blink, but his lower eyelid blinks. And so we have some footage of surveillance cameras that night that show us that blinking response. It's about every 6 blinks to his other eyes, 6 blinks on his left eye to 1 blink on his third eyelid on his right eye. So we'll keep an eye on it, and certainly right now we are in a windy pattern. As a matter of fact, we're in a pattern of fire risk. Although the temperature is relatively cool, the humidities are dropping. So we'll keep an eye on that. We look at conjunctivitis, which is kind of redness in the eye. We also are very careful about where he sleeps. If he gets a little bit of a straw or wood chip in his eye, that's something that staff check in the morning as well as in the afternoon. We can take a look at it. So right now, again, here's Gryzor going to see the exhibit pack. I believe that's Axel on the other side by the looks of the tail that was going by. And he is navigating there quite well. He's got a little bar. This is a gate that's suspended, so it swings. And so the only thing we were really concerned about is if he's tripping on that bar, but he seems to be navigating that pretty well. And if you see on the other side of the world, this is where they're greeting him. So this is remains wide open 24 hours a day now. It took us a while, maybe about a week of conditioning where we were concerned about it at night to make sure that, he was safe moving in and out. There was so much ice on that side of the enclosure. We didn't want to have them slip and get these guys excited. Now that risk has passed, so it seems like things are going pretty well. So it looks like the ravens have cleaned out the leftover meat in front of the exhibit. And I believe there's a raven going after a cache. I didn't see who cached that, but based on the size of the hole, I bet it had something to do with Big D, Denali there. So another question, are you still planning on getting wolves this summer? No, we have postponed the pup introduction until 2021. That was out of caution for a couple of things. First of all, pup care requires 24-hour day care from wolf care staff, and we had the need and still have the need to rotate our wolf care staff in teams. So we have different people caring for the wolves at different times so that teams don't overlap and risk, having the entire wolf care staff get sick because of overlapping shifts. So the challenges were great in trying to schedule that. And the other reason I think too, that I think is important to recognize is when we socialize wolves, which is why we do this, we socialize wolves so that our captive wolves feel comfortable in their exhibit. We want to make sure that they're tolerant of people. If we didn't know at the time, what we were going to have as far as people visiting, and even now we don't know. If we can't have more than 5 people or 10 people at a time, that's not a great way to expose the wolf pups during the critical socialization period to large crowds. If we don't socialize them to it when they're young, then when they're experiencing, when they're older, we're going to see anxiety or phobia about those circumstances that were not socialized to in a critical bonding period. So in fairness to the pups, we want to make sure that the facility is running like they would run in their entire life. And that means maybe 600 people at the window with flash cameras and kids and people howling and, lots of noise in the parking lot. We don't want to raise pups in such a secluded environment and then have, a very large active crowd and then, cause anxiety that is something that they live with for the rest of their lives. So that's kind of where we're at. So I, again, need to sign off because we have a program at 9:30. So short but sweet. Thanks for watching. Things are going good. I'll end with Gryzman watching the exhibit pack. That's such great stimuli for him to see those guys anytime he wants. He has that freedom to come and go. And we're so happy with where he's at 16. And we are hoping again to see you all soon. I understand that we will not be open next week, so I will be back next Friday, and I will be able to have a full hour next Friday to share with you any details about the pack. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Sorry it's a little bit shorter today, but we will see you again.